Hello YouTube, Dave here again. I thought I would do an update for some of my collection videos. I kind of got away from doing those, so I want to get back into showing some of the stuff off that I have built up in my collection over the years. So far I've done like my most of my music collection, my DVD collection, and I want to move on to my books and graphic novels and things like that. So novels, graphic novels, things of that nature. So I also have a couple just miscellaneous things that I thought I may as well show off because I don't know really at any other point that I would get a chance to do so, and I have these on the same shelf as my books. So there were just a few items that were sent to a friend of mine when he owned his store. So he used to own a game store, and it was for the 30th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons back in 2004, so a little while ago. But one of the things that he had sent to the store were some pins. So these are just pins. I've never actually worn it or anything, but it's 30th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons. As you can see, there's got the 2004 on it. So I've always kind of liked that. I'll just prop that up on my beholder friend. Another thing that he received were a bunch of, and I don't know how well they're going to show up on camera, but these are just window clings. So these are things that you would kind of put in your window. And this is the 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons logo. Now, as you can see, it is backwards because it's meant to be seen from the other side. But he just kind of gave me a bunch of those, and I've held on to them ever since. I don't think I've ever used any of them, but I just thought it was kind of a cool, neat little thing to show off. Now, in addition to just those minor things, I said I kind of want to show off some of my graphic novel or comic compilations before I get into the actual novels themselves. So the first ones I want to show off are actually not necessarily D&D related, but definitely D&D inspired. The first ones that I want to show off is the Nodwick Chronicles. So this is Holland Assets, and this was a collection of the Nodwick Chronicles 1 and 2. And this was a comic series that ran in Dragon magazine. I think they also had their own publication as well. And if you haven't read any of these, I definitely think you should check these out because these are pretty hilarious, with one of the big things being that, you know, Nodwick is a henchman and they can carry anything if they're told to, and they're completely expendable, and they're constantly just duct taping him back together as he gets destroyed pretty much every strip. And there's just some hilarious stuff here, and the cover actually captures a little bit of some of what was going on or popular at the time that this came out, which was way back in 2005. As you can see, there's actually some like there's a Pokeball and stuff like that, but Lord of the Rings stuff. And I don't know how well it's going to show up on camera, but there used to be a Lord of the Rings miniatures game. I think it had, like, it was one of the ones that had the clicky bases. I think it was either that or it had something that you moved up and down to indicate moon, stuff like that. So it actually has what looks like a couple boosters from that, which is just kind of neat. But anyway, so this is, like I said, this is a compilation of the Chronicles 1 and 2. Now, I do have a bit of a gap in the collection, which one of these days I'd love to go back and fix, because the next thing that I have is Nodwick Chronicles 5, the Tour of Duty. And again, these are just absolutely a blast to read, and every once in a while, usually every couple years or so, I will go back and reread all of these. What was really cool about this one is it had a comic where everything goes 8-bit. It's called Feudal Fantasy, and it's just, you know, kind of cool to see, like, all the 8-bit characters are making fun of some video game conventions and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. Another thing that appeared in Dragon magazine, or Dungeon magazine, I think it was Dragon, no, it was Dragon magazine. Well, technically both, but it was Zagonia. And this one was absolutely amazing. This was just a compilation. It was put out by Paizo, and it's just the comics from the magazines. It's just basically all of them collected together, and I think it's every single one that they've done. Now, some of these actually have like little commentaries. because I just always thought that was, you know, really kind of cool just to see some insight from the creator. Now in the back, and again, if you haven't read these comics, I highly recommend them because they were just fantastic. In the back, it also has, not all of them, but it has a smattering of comics from Mount Zugon. And this one was actually pretty hilarious as well. This was in Dungeon Magazine, so these were just all like little 4-panel strips. They, you know, they never got any larger than that, I don't think. But these were all like just really cool. So another really awesome compilation that I picked up. Alright, another really fantastic comic. It's a web series, or web comic, that you can, you know, read all the issues for free, or at least most of the issues, and that is Order of the Stick. So this is, again, just another thing that, or another comic that kind of, you know, makes fun or pokes fun at things like role-playing game mechanics, specifically D&D it focuses a lot on. These two books here are actually prequels. So you've got Start of Darkness, which focus on the villains, and then you've got on the origin of PCs, and like, you know, play on the words like of the origin of man. So these two only appeared, unless they changed that, because it's been a while since I've actually checked the strip out. But these comic strips only appeared in these books. What's also kind of neat is On the Origin of PCs came out first. So you can see it's actually book 0. Now they had compilations, I'll show them off here in a second, so that were numbered. So actually book number 1 came out before this one, and book number 1 was just a compilation of the actual webcomic. So they called this book 0, and because they did another prequel that came out years later, it is book -1. And I'd like to see if they keep kind of doing some more of that stuff, because I think that'd be kind of cool. But you got those. And then there's just the compilations from the actual webcomic itself. So you got the first one, which is just called Dungeon Crawling Fools. There are a couple that I am missing. But again, this is a really cool compilation. It started off like making fun of like the update to 3.5. Like the very first strip has the this has a little bit of a actually introductory background thing that is unique to this. There are some comics in here that weren't part of the actual web series, but this one here, this is issue number, or comic number 1, and it just goes over the change from 3.0 to 3.5. So you see like the bard can suddenly wear a chain shirt. You know, they say like, I understand, I believe you're being converted to 3.5. So you got the ranger who's really excited because he wants some really cool upgrade, and because he's a halfling, his dagger shrinks. And you see like the bard also, as he's just passing by, is like, ooh, more skill points. So this is just, again, a really cool comic strip. So check it out online if you haven't seen that either. But this is book number 1. I also have issue number 2, or book compilation number 2, which is No Cure for the Paladin Blues, and these all follow in order. So this is the second major story, and then we've got this one here is quite thick actually. Just an old receipt I was using as a bookmark. So this is number 3, War and XPs, and again this has quite a few comics in there. It's a pretty thick compilation. And then there is Don't Split the Party, which is number 4. I want to say there's at least a 5 out there. I know there's definitely an issue 5. I think there's like books 5, maybe even 6 by now, if not more. It's something that I really do want to get back into. I actually want to start by reading those and going from there. But anyway, so that was those. Now I want to move on to my Dungeons and Dragons comics, graphic novels, stuff like that. So I have a bunch of the individual comics that are in storage and kind of scattered, so it'd be very difficult to go and try to get all of those out at this point in time, just because some of them are tucked way back in the back of the storage room, which is down a couple floors below in the apartment building, so it's not the most feasible thing to get to right now. But I do have a few of like the compilations or graphic novels. One of the first things I want to show off is Eberron annual, Dungeons and Dragons, annual 2012. This was an Eberron story, and the characters in these are actually really great. I don't know how many of these annuals they actually ended up doing. I don't think there were too many. There may have been like a 2011, maybe a 2013, because it's just something that I don't think really stuck. But this one is, again, just a really cool story, and it's set in Eberron, and the two characters here, just really, really great. They also had there was a big event called Infestation, and it was like a Cthulhu crossover, and they had one of those with these Eberron characters too. Now going old school, there was a Dungeons & Dragons comic from way back in the 1980s, and IDW did a few compilations of them. So these were the Dungeons & Dragons classics, and these were, well, rough to say the very least. So December of 1988, back under the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. And, you know, some of these are interesting, but some of these are also pretty rough to kind of go back and read through now. I don't know if this is the one that has it or not, if it's in the Forgotten Realms one. But there is an issue that has the Tarrasque in it. And I just want to see if I can find that, because it's... this is not the Tarrasque, but there's a good old-fashioned rust monster. And let's just see if I can quickly find the one. Oh, it's not the Tarrasque, but there was also one that had, it was like all involved jesters and clowns and stuff like that, and that was pretty bad. Oh, I think I may have actually... I'm not going to try too hard to find it, just because it's probably not. I don't even know if it was in this one. There's another one that I have as well. So this was the original like 1980s Advanced Dungeons & Dragons comics, and again, it's interesting, but doesn't hold up well in a lot of places. And the one with the clowns, I think I stopped there because I just couldn't read anymore. And then you've got the Forgotten Realms one. So they had a Forgotten Realms comic as well. The old school Forgotten Realms logo. This one I don't think has the year, unfortunately. But this one was interesting as well. I think it held up a little bit better. Some of the stories, some of the characters were kind of interesting. Again, let me just see if I can find the... I think some of these characters crossed over from the previous one as well, or this came maybe before. Oh no, it's definitely after, because it's 19. There we go, we got a year here. So this was October in '89. And again, if I can't find the Tarrasque, I'm not going to worry about it too much, but it was just interesting. The artwork for the Tarrasque definitely looked kind of odd. Actually, I think that's it. I guess it's not as bad as I kind of thought, but yeah, that's the Tarrasque there. So anyway, again, just sort of an interesting look back into the past with some of the old school comics. Now they also, around the time 4th edition came out, it was, I want to say it was Dark Horse originally. It may have been IDW, but there was a Dungeons and Dragons comic that was put out, and this is the first compilation from that. There was a second one, and unfortunately they just kind of dropped the series altogether. This one was kind of circled around or revolved around the adventuring group Fells 5, and these comics were absolutely fantastic. And what was kind of cool about them, and I think some of the old school ones did this as well, but it even had all the characters. I had their stats and their character sheets. Now again, this was for 4th edition, but still really cool to see. And you got like the character sketch. So if you wanted to, you could actually play these characters, which is something that I always kind of floated around the idea of doing. They're all level 7, but it's just really cool, and this was a really great comic series, and it's a shame that it just kind of ended when it did. The series that took place after this started to focus really heavily on the individual characters' backgrounds. And I think they did a story that kind of revolved around the elf, they did one that revolved around the dwarf, and then it just kind of ended, which was really unfortunate. Another one that I've got here is a Dragonlance one. This is the Legend of Huma. So this one is, again, Huma is a well-known character in the Dragonlance universe, and this is sort of his, basically his backstory. So this is as he was just first becoming the, the legendary hero that he would later be known as. So it's kind of a really cool way to look back at his background, and this actually does show the comics here. So nothing too new, but there was a Dark Sun one, which I don't think I got, just because I wasn't huge into Dark Sun at the time. Another one that I have here is the more modern one, and this is Shadows of the Vampire. So this is set in the 5th edition era. This was the Curse of Strahd tie-in, and it has like Minsk back, which is really great because Minsk is just awesome. So there were other ones as well. There was, I think, Legends of Baldur's Gate, which I do want to get the compilation of at some point because that is when Minsk was brought back. And they have done one for Storm King's Thunder, which I'd like to get as well. And just the last of my graphic novels are adaptations of the Legend of Drizzt books. So I'll show the books off here in a moment. But these were done, this was definitely, well actually sorry, it wasn't Dark Horse, it was Devil's Due Publishing, which did the 4th edition one as well. But this is just a really nice compilation of comics that were done for the individual books in the Legend of Drizzt series. So this is Homeland. So this was the origin, this goes back to when Drizzt was born. And what's really cool is that, these graphic novels managed to capture a lot, pretty much, a lot of the major story. And it does a really good job of adapting the novel. So yeah, they got this one. And then they did so this was part of the Dark Elf trilogy. Legend of Drizzt Book 1, this is Legend of Drizzt Book 2, which is Exile. And again, another absolutely fantastic, really nice artwork inside. They did a really nice style for everything. And then we've got Sojourn, which was the 3rd book in that series. 3rd in the timeline as well. So these weren't the first books to actually come out. The Exile, or Homeland, Exile, and Sojourn were done after the actual original books that came out, which I'll show off here in a moment. But these were sort of like a prequel to the original first books put out by Salvatore. And the first one we have is, so Crystal Shard is, canonically it's book 4, but it was actually the first one to be released. Now this one here, it was good, but there were some odd art choices, and I don't know how well it's going to show it, but there are some sections where, like, it looks like they obviously had a new art team, because Drizzt looked a little bit different in these, and there sometimes he looks way older than he should. Kind of idea, and then it sort of writes itself back to where it was before. And I don't know if I can find any good examples of it right off the top here, but it was just kind of weird the way that they, like I said, you could tell that they changed artists, or it really feels like they changed artists. I never actually looked at the names, but so there you go. So there's that one. And there was a bit of a gap in between as well, if I recall correctly. And there are Streams of Silver. So this is the story where Brunor Battlehammer retakes Mithril Hall. And again, just really great adaptations. And then finally, there is the Halfling's Gem. So yeah, so as you can see, like, just the difference sort of in Drit's face between this and the one before. Just it looked like he got younger as these went on. So anyway, those are my graphic novels and comic collections, compilations that are either directly related to or inspired by D&D. The next thing I'm going to do is show off the novels that I have in my collection. Alright, so as for the novels here, I actually want to go through, and the first ones I want to show off are just some random ones that I've picked up at flea markets and yard sales and things of that nature. Starting with these ones here. Now, I have a stack of these books. I did have a few others. There were some duplicates and some doubles that I think I ended up giving away to someone who was interested in them, or someone who was into some of these books. I still have duplicates here of this particular book, but there were other ones that I had that I ended up giving away. So I ended up getting a few more than what was shown here, and I got one more. But what these ones, all these ones here, and there was, I think, like I said, 3 or 4 other ones that I ended up getting. They came in a, there was a flea market for one of like the, it wasn't like the SPCA, but it was like a local animal shelter. And it was basically $1, and I was handed a plastic bag, and it's like you can put as many books in as you want, just fill the bag, and you get them for $1. So they were originally, I think, like 25 cents each, so I saved a little bit of money on this, and like I said, I gave away a few of the other ones that were duplicates. I missed this one at the time. But anyway, so the ones that I ended up picking up here, I'm just going to start off with, and I picked all the D&D ones out that were there. So I looked through every single Dungeons & Dragons book. There weren't a ton of them, but we got here The Silent Blade by R.A. Salvatore, and this is probably one of the original versions of it, because I do have another copy of this with a completely different artwork on it. But there's that one there, and you can see like Dritz looks a lot different back then than he does now. I also picked up, as far as Forgotten Realms go, so I've got Canonical, which is another R.A. Salvatore book. He's one of my favorite authors. And this is book 1 there of the Cleric Quintet arc. So there are 4 other books, and I don't have any of them. This is the first one from that series, so I'd like to get more into this one. I want to say that this is the series of stories that introduces the dwarves, I think Boulder Shoulder brothers, Ivan and Pickle. The Pickle being like the dwarf druid, kind of a special character, who's just really awesome. I think he was introduced in the Cleric Quintet, but I haven't had a chance to pick up any of the other ones, or I haven't really read any of these either. But again, for $1, I got a whole bunch, so may as well. And all the other ones that I got here are Ravenloft, with the exception of there are 2 other ones that I want to show off that are all used books. So I generally try to buy new, and I like to try to keep them in better condition than what a lot of these are in, but again, you know, it didn't cost me very much. So we got some Ravenloft stories. We got Heart of Midnight, Carnival of Fear, and I don't know if these are like standalone, or if they're part of a series. And let's see, oh, never mind, we got it right here. So this is the 6th in an open-ended series of Gothic horror tales. So this is the 4th. Okay, good to know. We'll just go right down to The Enemy Within. Ravenloft. Again, I haven't tried taking these stickers off. Something tells me that they're not going to come off easy. I don't want to do it here on camera. So this is the 7th. So we got 6, 7, and 4. And then we've got Knight of the Black Rose. So like I said, I got 2 copies of this, just because when I was looking through the duplicates, I didn't notice that I had 2 of these. But Knight of the Black Rose, so that, I believe, is Lord Soth. On the Fable World of Kryn, Lord Soth, yep. And this is the 2nd, so I've got books 2, 4, 6, and 7, so there you go. Some other ones that I want to show off, like I said, that are all used books, not ones that I've purchased brand new. One of them is the Forgotten Realms, Realms of Valor. So I got this at a different yard sale, or not yard sale, flea market. And what this is it's a series of short stories by different authors. So I thought, you know, this would be a great way to kind of get to read some, you know, writing styles, or read some stuff from authors that I may not normally get the ability to read stuff from. and there's a little bit of like artwork involved. It just looks like a really cool product, and I do have already one of the stories that's in here, but again, it's just like a really interesting concept, and it's something that if Wizards of the Coast doesn't want to do like a lot of full-fledged novel series or things like that, I'd be totally okay with them going and just releasing like some short stories and stuff like that, because I think, like I said, these are really cool. And there we go. So yeah, so I got that one, and I also picked up this, and I didn't even realize this at first what I actually had, but this is Azure Bonds. So this is set in the Forgotten Realms, and there is a video game tie-in called Curse of the Azure Bonds, which is one of the SSI, or Strategic Simulations Incorporated, gold box Dungeons & Dragons games from the late 1980s. And so it was a sequel to the game Pool of Radiance, and there's actually a Pool of Radiance ad in here, which is really cool. I don't think they have an ad for Curse of the Azure Bonds itself, like the PC game. But this is, again, just really cool, and you got Dragon Bait here. And if you don't recognize him, or if you do recognize him, he is in the new Tomb of Annihilation adventure. So he's actually in there as well, and this is where he first appeared. So yeah, that's Dragon Bait, if you're wondering where Dragon Bait came from. Alright, so those were like the used books that I have. So most of the stuff that I have are books that I bought brand new. And a bunch of these, unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to get around to reading yet, but I still want to show kind of what I have here. So I'm going to start off with one of the some books from the very first campaign setting that I ever owned. And I got a ton of modules for it, and I didn't own any of the books. So I wanted to get at least a few of them. So what I have here are the Dragonlance Chronicles trilogy. So we got here the Dragons of Autumn Twilight, Dragons of Winter Night, and then we've got Dragons of Spring Dawn. And I think it was just the trilogy. I don't think there was, I think there may have been a fourth book later on, but I think this actually wrapped up the original storyline. And I just want to see if there's any mention of any other. I don't see any mention of any other books, but like I said, I'm pretty sure this was originally a trilogy. I don't think there was a book that does talk about the. So there's spring, autumn, and winter. There is one that I think has summer in the title, but like I said, I don't think it came out at the time. If I'm wrong, please let me know so I can go and seek it out, because I do want to have that whole series of books. And the binding's a little bit weird on this one here, but still happy to have them because these are hard to find now. A lot of these novels have been out of print for a while. Like this still has the 4th edition style logo, so that's how long ago those were. As for the rest of my novels are all set in the Forgotten Realms. And I know a lot of people are tired of the Forgotten Realms setting, but I still love it, and I loved a lot of the novels that were set in there. So the first one I just want to show off is sort of a standalone. I got this because they had it in the bookstore, and it just caught my eye, and I just decided, why not? I think I had $5 in points, so I saved a pretty decent amount of money on this. But this is Master of Chains, so this is for the Forgotten Realms. This came out during, I want to say, the 3rd edition days of Dungeons & Dragons. Let's see if I can find the actual year here. And what this was, it was part of a series of novels, but I believe they are all standalone. So I don't think that these were all interconnected. They're just basically stories that have a fighter as sort of the main character. So they are standalone to the point where if I don't find any of the other books in the series, I don't think I'm missing out on anything. And the publication date 2005. So yes, so this was during the 3rd edition days. Also, I have a compilation. So it's 3 books that are all put into one. This one's in a little bit of rough shape because I used to take this to my work when I would work like late nights or back shifts. So it got a little bit of wear and tear from being in my backpack. But this is Richard Lee Byers' Year of Rogue Dragons. So there were 3 books. And the 3 books, it was like the Dragon Rage series, I think it was called. There was the Rage, or the Flight of Dragons, or something like that, but there was the Rage, the Right, and the Ruin. So this is a compilation of all 3 of those books, and I still got my old bookmark in there. Does it say what pages the other ones start on? I don't think it does. Not a big deal, but this was a really cool series, and I like these compilations where they're all, I don't mind that they're soft covered, because again, they're cheaper, and it was $18.95 to buy this, versus $10 per book. So you basically get the 3rd book in the series for free, which is pretty cool. I also have a couple of Ed Greenwood novels here. So these are the last 2 of his books to come out since they basically put a hold on fiction. I don't think Wizards of the Coast ever formally announced that they were ending their run of novels or stuff, but they haven't put one out in quite a while. But I got 2 Ed Greenwood novels here. So I got Spellstorm, which is all about trying to find this lost spell that makes anyone super powerful. And just got a bookmark in there. I did start reading this when I picked this up. I was at the mall with family, and they kind of went off to do their own separate thing. I think they actually went to go see a movie, and I just kind of hung around the mall. So I did get a little bit of reading in after I walked around for a bit, but this one here, I actually liked it. I like it so far. I haven't gotten very far into it, but it seems kind of cool. And then I got Death Masks. This is the last one that he's put out. And I got to be honest, one of the major reasons that I actually got this is mainly because I understand that somewhere in this book, and probably not anywhere that's like majorly a huge part of the story, but from watching Acquisitions Incorporated, which is a bunch of like D&D live games done at like the Penny Arcade Expos or PAX conventions. Omen Drawn, Jerry Hulkin's character, became a masked Lord of Waterdeep way back several years ago. And from my understanding, he is mentioned in somewhere, he is shown somewhere in this novel. So I want to get around to reading that just because I want to see where Omen Drawn is. And that's the biggest reason why I decided to get that. Alright, so the next things that I just want to show off here are just some compilations of, well, not compilations, probably the wrong word, but some large, overarching, collaborative stories. And there's 2 series that I want to show off here. The first one I'm going to do is the more recent one, and this is the Sundering series of novels that basically take place between the end of 4th edition and the beginning of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. It kind of resets the Forgotten Realms and lays down the new groundwork for like how the gods interact with the world type of thing. So they're a lot less directly involved, but they have their chosen. And just, again, some really great stories here, and they're all done by different authors. The first one is R.A. Salvatore's The Companions. And I, again, genuinely love R.A. Salvatore's writing. I love his books. I find that I can read through them at a pretty brisk pace. Like, there's a lot of descriptive combat that you can read quickly to kind of capture that chaotic feel of battle. And again, I absolutely love his work. So I know it's not the popular thing to say, but this one was really great, and it deals all about the reincarnation of the Companions of the Hall. And their stories leading up to their reunion with Drizzt, which is, again, just really great story. I love it quite a bit. Then there's Paul S. Kemp, The Godborn. And these are pretty much all really good novels that I've read so far. This one here, I can't remember a whole lot of it. It's been a couple years since I read it. But this one really involves heavily the Shadowvar and the shades of Shade Enclave and the machinations of the goddess Shar and things along those lines. But this is, again, really cool story. The next one that I have is from Aaron M. Evans. This is The Adversary. This one is the largest of all the books. I mean, this goes over 500 pages. And as you can see, I still have my bookmark in here. I'm currently on page 240, and I gotta be honest, I kind of lost a little bit of interest in this one. I want to go back and finish it, and I am tempted to get the rest of her novels that came out after this. But I don't know, this one, it just feels like it drags on a little bit too much. Like, the point that I'm at now really should be like the climax of the story, and not even less than halfway through. So this one here, like I said, I kind of put down and walked away from, and I started reading, and I finished, obviously, the next couple here. But this is The Reaver, and this one revolves all around the return of Lathander from Amunitor. And I gotta be honest, I kind of wish he stayed as Amunitor. I like that god better, I like the name better than Lathander. Just because it's hard to say the name Lathander and say it with a straight face, and I know it's kind of an immature thing, but anyway, I like the Amunitor more. And if you've watched any of my, like, the live stream that I did, and some live streams that I plan on doing, I still use Amunitor as a god, because he is the same as Lathander, and it's just basically Lathander being reborn. And there are some people out there that were still worshipping Amunitor over Lathander, believing that he was the greater version. So I still like to use that in my campaigns. The next book that I've got here is The Sentinel by Troy Denning. And I don't know if I have it handy with me right here. I probably don't, but I actually have the miniature for this guy here. And yeah, Cleef Kenrick. And this book was awesome. I love this one quite a bit. I've got my bookmark at the end of it there. This one was absolutely fantastic. Probably my favorite of the series so far. Probably second favorite, I'd say, behind the companions, just because I like Salvatore so much. But this one was really fantastic. And I'm currently partway through The Herald. I haven't touched this actually in a while, and I want to get back into reading this, but this is the one that kind of wraps up the series. So one of these days I want to get back into that. But it is a really good series of books overall. The next one is probably one of my favorite collaborative series of all time. I mean, I haven't read too many of them, but the one I'm about to show I think is overall better than the Sundering ones. And this is the War of the Spider Queen series. So R.A. Salvatore set out the outline of events, and also sort of established some of the major characters to be used in the novels. But all of these novels are written by other authors. So, for example, this one here, Disillusion, is written by Richard Lee Byers. Fantastic book. Insurrection by Thomas M. Reed. This one, I think, was one of the weakest, probably the weakest in the series, and I think it just comes down to the writing style. I found that there are certain words that this author really likes to use, and I'm probably not going to be able to find it at a quick glance, but he really likes the word acquiesce. And I found that book was just absolutely overused in this, and I just found that, you know, I just wasn't as drawn in by the writing style. Now, it may just be that this is sort of like a low point in the story overall, but again, it uses contemptuous a lot in there as well. So like I said, this is probably the weakest one. Not that it's a bad book or, you know, a bad part of the story. It just, overall, Thomas M. Reed doesn't have a writing style that I particularly enjoy. So that one was sort of like, I just want to read it to get it over with. Condemnation, on the other hand, was really good. And this is done by Richard Baker. And all the rest of these were absolutely excellent books. Then we have Extinction by Lisa Smedman. Then we've got Annihilation by Philip Athens. And some of these people, like Lisa Smedman and Philip Athens, people that I haven't read any other stuff from, but they did really good jobs. The only thing that I'm a little disappointed in with my collection for the War of the Spider Queen series is that this book was really hard to find. I looked in several different bookstores multiple times, and the only version of this I was able to find was a second printing of the paperback. So as you can see, All the rest of them here were done during the 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons days. So they have like just the Wizards of the Coast logo on them. This one has the 4th edition D&D logo on, as well as the little thing up top here. Now, not that that's necessarily a bad thing, it's the same story, but it stands out versus all the other ones, and I kind of was hoping to be able to find the same version as the rest, just so that on the shelf it doesn't stand out quite as much. And then, of course, there is a Resurrection, which involves the return of Lolth. So, the War of the Spider Queen series of novels details the events that take place when Lolth falls silent, which was a major event in the Forgotten Realms around the time that 3rd edition came out. The City of the Spider Queen super adventure that Wizards of the Coast put out took place around that time, and how like the other drow gods essentially try to capitalize on what was going on to assert their dominance and try to take over the mantle as the god of the drow. So these are sort of my miscellaneous ones. So like I said, my used books that I picked up, and just some random books like the was it Master of Chains, I think it was, the Year of Rogue Dragons, my Dragonlance books. So those are just sort of like my miscellaneous ones, and what I want to show you next is the entirety of the Legend of Drizzt series, so we're going to look at that next. Alright, so on to my favorite series of novels, and I know that that's sort of an unpopular opinion, and that a lot of people just really hate on the Drizzt character, but I love the character, I love the characters in the stories, and, you know, I think they're all extremely well written, so, you know, for me it's not so much the fact that, you know, they miraculously survive everything. It's about, you know, the journey to get there, because even though they end up triumphing in, you know, a lot of these novels, the fact of the matter is that it's not always just, you know, an easy road to get there. So, like I said, I really like the stories. If you don't, that's fine. Just, you know, agree to disagree type of thing. But I do have the entirety of the Legend of Drizzt series. So, starting off with, the first 4 things I want to show are actually collected sets. And these are box sets with a, let's just aim that up a little bit higher. So these have just the paperbacks in them. And so this one is these are actually separated by sagas and series too. So this is the Dark Elf trilogy. This was the prequel, so these weren't the first 3 books that Salvatore put out. These were books 4, 5, and 6, but they take place canonically first, so it goes from the birth of Drizzt all the way to him making his way to the surface. And all of these stories are really, really good, and if you want to know sort of how Drow society works, Homeland is a really, really excellent book for that. And again, these are just some fantastic novels, and I got most of these sets I actually ended up getting, they were on sale, I think half off at the time that I picked them up. So there you go. So this is the Legend of Drizzt set 1, which has Homeland, Exile, and Sojourn. Up next we've got the Legend of Drizzt set 2. So this contains the original 3 books, the original trilogy, the Icewind Dale trilogy, I think it was called. That was done by Salvatore. So the first book he actually published with not Wizards of the Coast, but with TSR, was the Crystal Shard. So why don't we just kind of show? So we got the Crystal Shard, Streams of Silver. So this is where Bruenor Battlehammer retakes Mithril Hall. And then we've got the Halfling's Gem, which is where they go to Calimport, sorry. No, Calimshan, yeah. Anyway, really, really cool books as well. I found that I liked the way he wrote the characters better in the Dark Elf trilogy. You can definitely tell that these are sort of the earliest works, and they didn't have all the characters quite down yet. Because the way Drizzt acts in Crystal Shard is a little bit different than the way that he acts in the rest of the books, but they're still really good reads nonetheless. Up next is the 4 book set, and I can't remember the name of this series. I want to say it has something to do with darkness, I believe. It's been so long, like I read these a long time ago. Yeah, it just has it under the Legend of Drizzt. For the life of me, I can't remember what it was now. But this was sort of a darker period of time, in the character for the character. Like with Dritz, they deal with the loss of a character, and just a lot of things happen in this one, in these series. But again, really excellent books. I read The Legacy, I think, in a day and a half. I just really got sucked into that one quite a bit. And some of the best, some of my favorite stories are actually in this set. Alright, moving on to the fourth and the last of the slipcases sets that I have. This is the set number 4. This contains, a little boat out here, but it's got the Silent Blade, which I had a different version of, I showed a little earlier. So let's just have a look at that one. Just slide these out here. There you go, so we got the Silent Blade, and this is like the more familiar Dritz look that we have nowadays, done by Todd Lockwood, just some amazing artwork. And then we have Spine of the World, and what's cool about Spine of the World is actually that it deals entirely with Wulfgar. So none of the other characters really make an appearance in there, except for maybe early on. It's been a while since I read it. But this is all about Wulfgar after he returns from the Abyss, having been tortured for several years by a demon, and just sort of him coping with being back. And it's really really well done story. Probably one of my favorites of all the stories so far. But really well written. And then you've got Sea of Swords, which kind of has everybody reuniting, which is really cool. And again, these are really great stories. I picked this up. I think this was the last one that I got, and I think I ended up paying full price for this one, which was $30. It was the same price if I bought the books individually, so why not have the case to put them in at the same time? Now, after the Silent Blade, in between the Silent Blade and all the other ones, Salvatore actually had a book that he was going to put in that dealt with Artemis, Entreri, and Jarlaxle. And he ended up actually going from, I think it was supposed to be like just one book that was going to be part of the series here, and instead it became its own series, and that is the Sellswords. So this is a trilogy of books. So Servant of the Shard, Promise of the Lich King, and Road of the Patriarch. So the Silent Blade reintroduces the Crystal Shard, which at the end of that, Jarlaxle takes it away. And this kind of deals with the whole idea of just dealing with that and the adventures that these two go on. And this is just an amazing book. I love this one to death. Jarlaxle is one of my favorite characters ever in the Forgotten Realms, and I think I like him so much because I actually, before I even knew of any of the novels, or before I had read any of the novels, or even knew any of the characters really, I made a small band of Drow NPCs, and one of the characters, the name I gave him was Risen Illistrin, and he was pretty much like how Jarlaxle is, although not like with all the magic items and the trinkets and stuff like that. But he ended up going from being an enemy of the players in the campaign to becoming an actual ally of them, just because he's not actually necessarily evil. And I had him. He was kind of like a cocky, arrogant type of character as well, and he just like Jarlaxle is so much like that, only much better written and developed. But these books were just absolutely fantastic and really made the character, especially of Artemis, really developed him quite well. So after that was the Hunter's Blade trilogy. This is actually where I started my Forgotten Realms, really started getting back into reading. I wasn't really much into like reading novels or stuff like that at this point. I used to love it back in like junior high, and then after junior high, high school, I kind of got away from reading. And I decided to pick this book up just because it was on sale at the time. It was $11 normally. I think I paid $7 for it. So I picked it up, and over the course of about a month and a half to 2 months, I read through it. And it's like, okay, I actually really like that story. Around the time that I finished reading this, I went and picked up the second book in the series, The Lone Drow. And I read this one in about a week, I think, a week or 2 weeks. to finish this one, and right around the time that I actually finished this one was when they released the paperback version of the final book in the series, The Two Swords, and this one I read in a weekend. So this is where I really got into reading, and then I went back and bought all the box sets afterwards. So the Hunter's Blade trilogy establishes the Orc Kingdom of Many Arrows. If you're familiar with that from like the 4th edition setting, this is the story that sees that take place. And the battle between King Obold Many Arrows and Drizzt in this book here was fantastic. Really, really cool. And I really started to love Obold as a villain, or as a character, I should say, even after this, after I got this. Absolutely well done, fantastic. And I have the Obold miniature, and I was super happy to get it. Alright, another one that I just want to kind of show here quickly. I haven't read this one yet, but this is a cooperative effort from R.A. and Gino Salvatore, and this is the Stone of Timora. And what this is it's a collection of some books that are designed for younger readers. It does involve Drizzt, but Drizzt isn't the main character. I think he just kind of makes appearances. In fact, they don't even have him on the cover here. What was great about this, and the reason that I love this so much, is my fiance bought this for me shortly after we started seeing each other. And what's really cool about this is that it's signed by both of them. So you got like Gino Salvatore and R.A. Salvatore having signed this. I think she said she got it, I want to say she got it from their website, and she paid a fair amount of money for it, and it blew me away. And I want to keep it in the best condition possible, so I don't want to, damage it by reading it. So I want to actually see if I can find the individual books or another copy of this. But this, like I said, this is geared more towards a younger readers, so I think it's going to be a little easier to kind of read, but it doesn't have like the large print. As you can see, there's actually a pretty small print, but that's another series of stories that I have there. Alright, the next things that I want to show off. First I'll just go with what we got here. This is the Collected Stories. So this is a series of short stories, and where I'd shown you that used book that I had earlier that was a collection of short stories as well, this one has the R.A. Salvatore story in here, The Dark Mirror. So this is just a series of short stories, again, that take place in between several of the other books. And they do tell you, I think that the beginning, before you get into the stories themselves, I do think that they mention where some of these stories take place. So I actually had to not read all of these because there are some books that I hadn't read yet. But this, again, just really cool. The short stories are all pretty fantastic. Alright, up next is the Transitions trilogy. So the Transitions trilogy was taking the storyline from 3rd edition into 4th edition, which was a centuries jump. So what we have here is just kind of wrapping up some of the stories that were started. So the Orc King kind of wraps up the Hunter's Blade storyline with Obold, and kind of moving on from there. Then you've got the Pirate King, take place after that, and then you have the Ghost King. And so this one here, this was actually a really, really tough read, a really hard book to get through, just because this is the book where Salvatore had to kind of wrap up some of the characters, and the deaths of some of the characters, like Canterbury and Regis the Halfling, was actually a really, really strongly emotional moment, and I wasn't prepared for just how intense that was going to end up being. So again, I think he said this was one of the hardest books that he ever had to write, and it shows that he really loved these characters, and it was just a pretty emotional send-off for them. After that, we go into the Neverwinter saga. So this is where they kind of started tying in like the Neverwinter MMO. Not that this is really strongly connected, but these stories do take place in Neverwinter. And the first book is Gonalgrim. So this is where they discover the lost city of Gonalgrim, which is one of the earliest of the dwarven settlements. And this Dritz has sort of some new adventuring companions, or he meets some new adventuring companions. He loses Brunor Battlehammer in this one, and again, it's a pretty emotional death that occurs here, but really fantastic book, and I enjoy this one quite a bit. Jarlaxle, of course, makes his return. Then we've got Neverwinter, so the book that the series this was actually named after. So this is Neverwinter Saga book number 2. So this one is also signed. I'm just covering up my last name just for privacy reasons. Not that I'm worried that people are going to like stalk me or hack me or anything, but I actually got this signed by R.A. Salvatore when he was down for HalCon, which is a comic and gaming convention in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He did a Q&A and an autograph session, so I got this book autographed from him. The Q&A was amazing. I had mentioned a couple of times that I had heard that he said that the authors were working on the campaign setting. That was the Q&A session where I heard that from. Book number 3, Charon's Claw. Picked this up as well. Another excellent book. And I wanted to try to get as many hardcovers as I could at this point, but there was one that I just couldn't get. So the conclusion to the Neverwinter Saga, The Last Threshold, I could only find the paperback version. It had just been too long for me to find the hardcover. But this was actually a really great series. I enjoyed this one quite a bit. The Companions takes place after this. And I got the Companions in paperback because I didn't want to try to get 6 novels from 5 other authors that I wasn't really sure of or hadn't really read too much of before. I didn't want to get those in hardcover, but the Companions takes place after that. So that's when the Companions of the Hall make their return. And the story arc that takes place after that is referred to as the Companions Codex. So now that they are all back, the first story is Night of the Hunter. So this is the Companions Codex number 1. So like I said, everyone's back. They've been reincarnated. Their souls have been put back into new hosts. And the story kind of follows the trying to right the wrong that was creating the Kingdom of Many Arrows. And it sort of deals with Dritz kind of being at odds with the other characters over that, and really, again, really well done. Rise of the King kind of sees Brunor take his rightful place, kind of reclaim his identity. Before he was traveling around using the name from his new life, his new birth. But in this one, he kind of makes his presence once again known. And then Vengeance of the Iron Dwarf wraps up the story. So this kind of deals with the actual desire to take out the Kingdom of Many Arrows and stop the conspiracy with the Drow and the Giants and aligning with the Orcs of Many Arrows. So again, these were really cool stories, really well written. And then we get into our final trilogy. So these are the last 3 books to have been put out, including the last book that's been released by Wizards of the Coast so far. The first one is Archmage, and again, just wasn't able to find the hardcover. The hardcover was around $30, so I just kind of hummed and hawed over it a little bit too much, to the point where I could only get it in paperback. But this one here sets up the Rage of Demons storyline. So with Demogorgon and the Demon Lords being loose in the Abyss, this book deals with that, kind of sets that up and shows what happened to kind of have those Demon Lords come in. We also have Maestro, which focuses heavily on Jarlaxle, which is awesome. And again, just sort of continues the storyline with like the Rage of Demon stuff. And the last book is Hero. So I'm still currently reading this one. You can kind of see my bookmarks in it there. So I haven't finished it yet. But at the end of Maestro, or near the end of Maestro, Dritz becomes kind of stricken with an abyssal form of madness, and this book is kind of dealing with all of that as well as some other events. Like I said, I haven't finished it yet, but I'm really enjoying it so far, and this is the last in the series. This is the last ever Forgotten Realms book or novel to be released, so I'm hoping that they do more. I want to see more fiction come out, and if this does wrap up the Dritz character and storyline, that's fine. I've enjoyed the ride so far, but I do want to see Wizards of the Coast continue to release new books. Anyway, this is my collection of novels. So novels, comic compilations, graphic novels. That's all that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. And, let me know what some of your favorite Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, Dark Sun, any Dungeons & Dragons based novel. Let me know what some of your favorites are. I look forward to reading those in the comments below. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.